Hi, I'm Jeffrey.
And I'm Nate.
And you're listening to SoundWaves. Hey everybody, we're back with a new SoundWaves episode. Today, instead of Rob, again, for like the third time in a row, we have a new guest host, and it's been somebody that we've been wanting to get onto the podcast for a long time, Nate.
Hello.
Nate and I went to the movies a few times over the summer, so we're going to be talking about the movies that we saw, because I feel like they're worthy to be talked about. So first, I think we should say Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for last.
Yeah.
Since we're going to be talking the longest about that. Okay, so let's go Spider-Man first. So Spider-Man Far From Home was the sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming, and it's kind of like the epilogue after Endgame. And I felt like it was really important for the new phase of the MCU, right?
Yeah, but honestly, I feel like it just should have ended after Endgame.
Like that should have been the end of Phase 3?
No, I just feel like that should have just been like the end,
the end of Marvel?
Yeah.
I don't know about that, because they have like so many... Maybe, okay, I could see it being the end for like a few years, but the end of Marvel completely, I don't know about that. I think they should have stopped it maybe for like 5 years or more, and then maybe after a decade at the most, come back and then do the rest of their stories.
I guess so, but like just do each of the individual, like I hope they're not planning on doing something else that's like really big, like a whole new other Avengers movie, because I feel like Endgame basically just sealed it all up, and that was like the final big thing that they're all meant to do. It just kind of seems pointless to keep on going on with this.
I think they are planning new Avengers movies though, but like I think there are so many new heroes that a new Avengers movie wouldn't feel like a retread of what we've already seen, but more like an advancement on what we've already seen in terms of like superhero movies. So that's why I'm excited, because I want to see what the new Avengers team is like. But at the same time, I think I might be getting Marvel fatigue, because I bought Endgame like today, and I don't know, it was kind of a reluctant buying. Like I'm like, another superhero movie that I not have to drop, like $30 on.
Yeah, I felt like that way for a while. It's just I didn't even really watch Captain Marvel because it just didn't seem like it meant too much to the next movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I'm getting to at this point, where it's like, unless it's actually vital to watching, or unless watching it is like vital to the storyline itself, I'm not going to watch it. Like before, when it was something pretty simple, like, I don't know, just like Thor 2, that one wasn't a huge one. I'd still watch that one because I legitimately enjoyed going to the movie theaters to watch a new superhero movie, but it's like at this point we've had 21 different superhero movies and it's just getting old at this point.
I know, yeah. I think that's why movies like Guardians of the Galaxy and Doctor Strange are my favorites, because they don't feel like a typical superhero movie.
Also, what I've noticed with most of the superhero movies is they have the same problem with pacing. Each one of them, it's sort of like they have a little bit of story, and then they have action, and a little bit of story, and then they have a little bit of action, and it doesn't seem like a clear-cut first, second, and third act. It sort of feels like it's a tiny first act, if no first act at all,
mm-hmm.
and then it's just a gigantic second act with a bunch of small action scenes,
mm-hmm.
with just a small third scene. So it just sort of seems like it's just a bunch of little action scenes with a big action scene to tie it all together.
Yeah, I could see that, because you said that about Far From Home, right? That it seemed that way?
Yeah.
I could definitely see that.
It was the same with Homecoming, but I think I enjoyed Homecoming a little bit more, just like the comedy-wise.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, so yeah, we should actually review Far From Home instead of just talk about all the other ones. But in terms of how sequels should be, like continuing the character arcs and everything enjoyed from the first one, I think Far From Home definitely did a good job with that. And you like Homecoming more, but I think I might like Far From Home more, just because I thought Mysterio was a cooler villain, and I think that the whole going on a trip thing is a really fun setting for a superhero movie.
I agree. I'll agree that Mysterio is a better villain than the Vulture. Like, the Vulture almost had nothing to do with the movie. It was basically just Spider-Man setup, but in a way I sort of like that. It was like sort of getting to know him, getting to see how he lived through high school, and to me that was entertaining because you didn't get to see that with any of the other superheroes.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of fun to see like how a kid would also handle having a gigantic responsibility on his chest when he doesn't even want it, which it just sort of seemed like, I guess Far From Home was a repeat of that.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I guess I just sort of like the way they handled the characters better in Homecoming, because it sort of just seems like the relationship with MJ was out of left field, even if it was in the comic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because even, like in Homecoming, the whole time he was trying to go for Liz, and then all of a sudden they introduced his like relationship with MJ. They kind of teased it at the end of Homecoming, but it definitely kind of came out of nowhere. Yeah. And especially since they were they had like picked up from where they left off in terms of the snap. We didn't get to see the time before that because the snap was in like supposed to be in 2018 or something, right?
I think so. So it was basically supposed to be 2023, right?
Yeah, in Far From Home. But in Homecoming, that took place in 2016, I think. So we there were 2 years of just like, I want to know what was happening with their relationship between those 2 years, because you would think that if they tease a relationship at the end of Homecoming, that would kind of grow into, instead of, in Far From Home when he's barely starting to try to get to talk to her, that should have been like way before. Like, I feel like he did nothing for 2 years then.
That's true, but it's like with a lot of the superheroes sort of do that. It's like with Hulk, you didn't know what was happening for years upon years. It's just all of a sudden he just comes back in Avengers, and I never really had a second thought about it. And it's like in Avengers, that was probably one of my favorite Marvel movies.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it still works out. It's just with MJ, that was sort of weird.
Yeah. So overall, what would you give Far From Home?
Far From Home, I'd probably give it a solid 7 out of 10.
7? Okay. I'm going to go... I think I went higher when I first saw it, but I think now I'm going to settle at like 8.5. That seems pretty good. And then, so the next movie that we saw together was Crawl. And I'm excited to talk about this one.
I'm not. That movie was awful.
I know, that's why I'm excited to talk about it, because I liked it. So basically, in Crawl, there's this, what do you say, like young adult? She looked
I think she was
early
in college.
20s. Yeah, like a college girl who is caught in the middle of a hurricane, right?
Yeah.
In Florida. And she has to go somewhere to save her dad, and she gets stuck trying to save him under his old house in the crawl space that's under there. So that's why it's called Crawl. Even though you said that she spends most of the time like kind of hunched over and like waddling.
They spend the most of the time in the little crawl space for almost the whole movie. So the whole movie just feels extremely cramped. They're in this one space. They're just kind of sitting there. And then they're just constantly talking about the alligator that's going to be basically the Jaws of the movie, I guess. Or I guess like the shark of Jaws.
Mm-hmm.
That's the crocodile in Crawl. But like, they keep on trying to pass it off as, oh, she has to crawl. But there's literally some times where she's just standing up and running. So there's times where she's trying to crawl away from the alligator where I'm just saying, we've seen her run through this space earlier in the movie. Why doesn't she just get up and run so she doesn't die?
Oh, that's another thing too. Like, she doesn't seem to die. And both of us can agree on like the fact that she didn't take nearly enough physical damage as she should have during the movie. Like, there's one point where an alligator rips somebody's arm off, and right, was it his arm or was it like from his elbow down?
Yeah, it was his elbow down, got ripped off, and then his leg got snapped in half.
Mm-hmm. And when she got bit on the arm, the alligator held on for a little while, for like 10 seconds, and then it just kind of let go after she hit it, and she was fine. She was bleeding, of course, but she didn't break anything.
It just sort of looked like a dog bite.
Yeah, it didn't get ripped off. So yeah, that kind of, even though it's, supposed to be like a suspension of disbelief throughout the whole movie, that was one of the times where I was like, okay, I don't believe for a second that would have happened. Because their bites are really strong. I felt like for the rest of the movie they showcased that well. Like the alligators also ripped somebody's head off, and I felt like can they actually do that? I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, they have one of the strongest jaw strengths in the world, so they're able to like crush bone, rip off arms. They do this thing where they bite on and they roll, and that's usually able to tear off arms. I just have the problem with they have like a 2,000-pound bite force, so they should have been able to easily just snap her arm, and that was there was a lot of things that bothered me about that movie. There was the fact that when they were trying to get away, instead of getting up onto the roof where the flooding basically wasn't an issue, they tried to first get onto the boat, and when the boat didn't work, then they were like, oh, let's get onto the roof, where I feel like any rational person wouldn't try to walk through alligator infested waters, because they were basically on an like alligator reserve or something, and instead of making the rational choice of just being like, oh hey, let's head to the roof where all of the alligators are not, they decided to swim through the alligators. Like, I don't know why, but there was like alligators like every 2 feet, and they decided to swim under them instead of just simply going up to the roof, which was pretty easily accessible, and that could have like basically saved their dad's arm. What made it so they wouldn't have almost died. So some of their friends, I don't think, would have died, and it would have made just the movie a lot more believable if they just immediately headed up there. It's just it didn't feel real.
Yeah, I think there are definitely a lot of things that they could have done to make it feel more real, but overall, the things that, I mean, they made the choice usually to kind of reject believability in favor for a more entertaining movie. And, with a movie like Crawl, that's kind of what you have to do. I mean, you can try to make it realistic, but to make a more interesting movie, I think you would have to kind of take a little liberty with reality. And I think that's why I liked it, because it's just fun. It's not supposed to be accurate or anything, and it's kind of like an edge of your seat type movie. Like, you want to be invested in what's happening for the whole hour and a half or however long it was without feeling bored, and you just want to feel kind of like super, like that you want the movie to be suspenseful, and I think it was. So overall, I think I'd give it like a maybe 7.75. I don't know if I'm going 8. I think originally I gave it an 8, but I'm going to bring it down a little bit. 7.75 is out of 10 is my final score.
I'm going to say it was a 4 out of 10 because it probably had the worst ending of any movie I've ever seen, where it was just like they got to the roof, they saw a helicopter, and it just suddenly ended, and that was it. Also, I would have been okay with also suspending belief for the duration of the movie if the movie was at least fun. I didn't have fun during it either. Half the time, the mom or the dad and the daughter were arguing basically over their mom, over everything, and then like with a couple of alligator attacks sprinkled in there. Like I wasn't on the edge of my seat. I wasn't wondering, oh, are they going to be okay? It was just really boring, with the dad and the daughter arguing constantly about their mom. And then, like, the alligator attacks, barely anything happened, and you felt like nothing was going to happen to the protagonist because she was essentially invincible, because if she ever got bit, it didn't even look as bad as a dog bite, I'm going to have to admit. And it didn't feel entertaining. I'm going to have to give it a 4 out of 10.
Ooh. Oh, you know what we need to go back to? So, I don't know if you remember, but whenever we have a new guest on the show, I made it a thing that we like make them a superhero alter ego, and so we need to give you yours. I already called you this in the group chat, but isn't it Aqua? What is it? Aqua something?
I think it was either Aqua Boy or Water Boy or Aquaman.
I think I don't want to do Aquaman since that's already a cool hero. Water Boy is already Adam Sandler, so I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to go Aqua Boy.
Okay.
And that's because, we should explain it. It's because Nate did water polo for how long?
I did water polo for 6 years and then swim for 10.
Yeah, so I think you're pretty much Aqua Boy at this point. So I think that's a fitting superhero alter ego. Okay, so now back to the last review that we're going to do. And this is one that I really wanted to talk about, and that's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
It was a really good movie.
Yeah. Do you want to start, and then I'll say what I want to?
Okay, so Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it was a really good movie, which it was basically a series of stories with, I guess, 3 different people.
Mm-hmm.
One with Leonardo DiCaprio, one with Brad Pitt, and the final lady, I can't remember who the actor was.
Oh, the actress?
Yeah.
Margot Robbie.
Okay, Margot Robbie. It was basically the story of 3 different people. And, like, you could see how Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio were tied in together. But then you didn't know what was happening with Margot Robbie the whole time. But, like, you still saw her whole story. So it's just, you got to see all these stories unfold. Each one of them was interesting on their own. Like, each story was pretty fascinating to watch. With Brad Pitt being basically, like, this action star all of his own. Leonardo DiCaprio having, like, this sort of emotional story where basically he had to be more of an actor, while Brad Pitt was just sort of an action man. But, like, it was all action done very well.
Oh, and before you keep going, let's keep the ending a surprise and try to keep, like, you know, the rest of the movie vague. You know, like the iconic scenes.
Yeah.
Let's keep it vague, so then if anybody wants to go watch it, they can go watch it.
Yeah, let me just say, if you ever read the reviews on how bad the ending is, it's mostly because of how it was a controversial ending. It was a very good ending in my opinion. All the stories tied together really well. It all ended up tying together perfectly in my opinion. But so basically how it developed was Margot Robbie had this, like, happy-go-lucky life. Brad Pitt was the action star, and then Leonardo DiCaprio had, like, emotional scenes where he was basically questioning what was happening in his life. It was all, like, really interesting on its own, but then once the story all tied together, it made for a pretty cool scene at the end, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
All of the acting was really good, with a special one of, I think it was an 8-year-old girl who actually could act very, very well.
Yeah.
Even though she was only in the movie a little bit, she was a very impressive actor for her age.
Mm-hmm.
And actually just a great actor in general. Leonardo DiCaprio did very, very well. Margot Robbie, I can't really say anything about her acting because she didn't really do much in the movie, I guess.
I think even though she didn't, like, have a lot to do acting-wise, she brought kind of a sense of joy and positivity that the movie was kind of, like, I want to say lacking, but she definitely increased the joy that was in the movie, because, you know, you have Leonardo DiCaprio and he's like a struggling actor, and that's not a spoiler because that's like the whole point of the movie.
Yeah.
But he's like a struggling actor, and then you have Brad Pitt, who's his stuntman, and so if Leonardo DiCaprio is struggling, then that means Brad Pitt is too. And so both of them kind of go on this downward spiral together. And then you have Margot Robbie, who's finding her newfound fame because she plays Sharon Tate in the movie. And this kind of, like, is a contrast between the two storylines. Or, well, there's 3, but considering how it's like a duo and then Sharon Tate, she's kind of having her upward spiral, and she's like becoming famous, and she's a star. And so I felt like her kind of like attitude that was super bright and happy kind of balanced out the sadness and the depression, I guess you could say, of Leonardo DiCaprio. And then Brad Pitt's just kind of there. He's like
Brad Pitt's a very fun character. I think his character was the most fun out of any of them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, while his character was on screen, you definitely felt on edge.
Mm-hmm. Especially for, like, one specific scene. That's, like, probably the second most tense scene in the whole movie. And I think that was his moment to shine in terms of his story. I think that was the most interesting part that we got to see from his character.
But in general, I had a lot of fun with Brad Pitt's character. Like he was basically like an action star, and each one of his scenes where he was like doing stuff, it was really, really fun to watch. Like just seeing him whenever he got in a fight, it was a really interesting fight. Sometimes you'd have a good laugh, sometimes you'd be on the edge of your seat.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like as far as the actors go, he definitely had the most range in the movie. Like he'd have tense scenes, he'd have happy scenes, he'd have scenes that make you laugh. It's like he just sort of had all of it going at once. He was sort of like the middle ground of the two characters.
Mm-hmm. I think that might be where we differentiate, because I think Leonardo DiCaprio had like the most to do. That's because he was depressed partly for part of the movie, and then he was like super joyful when he I won't spoil it, but like there's a scene where he has kind of his moment, and he's cool too. Like he has his scenes where he just like he's super cool. And yeah, but for Brad Pitt, even though he was like relaxed and he had those scenes where he was like in an intense situation, I don't know if he really like had that much to do acting wise. I think the directing and the story kind of had more to do with that intensity than his acting did.
I guess I can see that. I do think Leonardo DiCaprio was better in acting that movie than Brad Pitt, but definitely the scenes where Brad Pitt was in them, I think they were a lot more fun.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also the soundtrack, I want to talk about that, because at first when I saw the movie, I was kind of thinking like, oh yeah, the music was pretty good. Oh, that was my cat. It just jumped over Nate. I think the soundtrack was pretty good. At first I thought it was pretty good, and then I kind of went home and I forgot about it for a few days, and then I saw the movie a second time, and I was like, oh wait, that was actually really good. So then I listened to the soundtrack in its entirety, because the first time I watched it, I was more focused on the movie, and then the second time I watched it, I kind of picked up on the music more. So then after I watched it the second time, I listened to the whole soundtrack, and now that I did that, I need to recommend it to everybody listening, because if you listen to it all the way through, it's just like a super cool experience. Like you have the songs from the movie in there, and then there's some ads that Tarantino put in the soundtrack, and it kind of ties it all together, and it makes it feel like you get transported back to the late 60s. And I feel like that's just as much of an experience as going to the movies and watching it was. So, I mean, if you can't make it out to the movies, then at least, go on to iTunes or, YouTube at least, and listen to the soundtrack, because it was amazing. What else do I want to talk about? I think a lot of people I saw were claiming that it wasn't well written, but I think the opposite. I think it was, really... Wait, what did I say? I said it wasn't that they said it wasn't well written, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think it's really well written. And that's because, you said, there are 3 storylines that kind of all come together at the end. And I don't think people notice that, it's called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So even though it's a movie, it's not supposed to be like the movies that we're used to these days, where it's like somebody rising up against evil and they go through this whole journey to take them down. I think it's more like a fairy tale, in that it's kind of a metaphor for like a falling star and a rising star in Hollywood. And I think those 3 storylines are kind of like, if you read in a fairy tale, like back in when you were a kid reading a book about some, I don't know, some fairy tale figure. They would be in, the magical land, and in this case it's Hollywood, where anything could happen. And you definitely see that in the movie. Some crazy stuff happens, and the characters kind of go through a relaxed journey. It's not really super intense where they're trying to get to a destination at the end of the movie, but I think it ties together really well. And there is a sense of mysticism throughout the whole thing. Like it never really feels like it's
real.
Yeah, like it's real. It's more like like somebody's imagination or somebody like giving their dream of Hollywood, which Tarantino does.
It's like almost like a little kid's dream of what Hollywood should be, like all of the action, all of the drama, everything that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then like the way they layer like story upon story is really interesting in that movie. Like you'll have times where there will be like flashbacks or flashbacks within flashbacks, and like you don't even know what's happening in the present, and in a way I think that was intended, and it works extremely well because it's like you'll go through this whole storyline and you won't be thinking about what's happening in the present because it's almost like you feel like what you're in right now is the present. Like the past is the present, and then you'll have like a flashback within a flashback, and the way they do it is so interesting and fluid, and it works so well. I will say for the writing, I do think it is written really well. Except for the Margot Robbie scenes, they don't give her much to say or anybody much to say, really. It's just... But that's also sort of like the beauty of it, is that it's sort of like acting through motions and facial gestures. And in that way, I think it worked out really well.
Yeah. I think... I do think they should have given Margot Robbie more to do. But in the context of the movie, you know, some people say, like, well, why even put her in there if you're only going to use her for, you know, like one specific purpose. But I think that it also had to, you know, like I said before, contrast Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt and their journey. So I think that's one of my only few problems with the movie, is that they should have given her more to do. And one minor thing that we wanted to talk about, right, was, do you want to tell them?
There was, in the very beginning, there was just this random part where there was an outside narrator, almost like a storyteller, and he cracked a quick joke at the very beginning of the movie, where it was basically Leonardo DiCaprio says that his license had expired, and all of a sudden this outside narrator comes in and says, no, he didn't. He got it taken away after too many DUIs. And we were like, oh, okay, this is going to be like a narrated story. That never came back. The outside narrator never came back until the very end of the movie, and for like a solid 30 minutes later you're still waiting for that outside narrator to just come back, and you're like, well, what happened to it? Like it's really weird how they do it.
Yeah, I think it's better that they didn't keep it going throughout the whole movie, because I don't know if I would have really liked that, but I definitely don't think that they should have just included that one joke, even though it was funny. That's why I'm kind of giving it a pass. If it wasn't a funny joke and it just didn't land at all, then I would have been like, why'd they even, why? And I kind of would have been more mad at it, that it was there, and then just kind of like forgotten for the rest of the movie. But like a few minutes after the scene, after the narrator cut in, I forgot about him completely. So, I mean, I don't think it was too big of a problem, but that's why I said it was like a really minor thing that I would have just kind of, you know, if it was up to me, I probably would have cut it out.
Yeah, it bothered me for a little bit, but at the same time, the movie was interesting enough that you sort of forgot about that instance a little ways into the movie, because like the movie definitely, it takes a while to pick up, but once it does pick up, you just sort of forget about that random narrated line. And it's a really good movie overall, and I'd say the joke was pretty funny. But yeah, it didn't really deserve to be in there.
Mm-hmm. And so now I want to address like whether or not you should see it, and then I'll give my rating. So if you don't, I posted this on Snapchat when I first saw it, but if you don't appreciate like anything about, like if you don't care about Hollywood at all, then I don't think you'll really like this movie. Or either, in order to enjoy this movie completely, I think you either need to be interested in Hollywood and, you know, celebrities, like what they go through on a daily basis, or you have to be interested in slow burn movies that have a payoff at the end. So movies like, you know, The Shining, Arrival, yeah, 10 Cloverfield Lane, like things like that, where it's like a tense. Well, this one's a dramedy, but the other ones weren't really comedy dramas. So if you if you fall into either of the two categories, like you like slow burn or you like Hollywood, I definitely recommend it. I think you should come out happy. But if you don't think you fall into either of those, you're probably going to be one of those people that either comes out hating it or just comes out thinking that you wasted 3 hours of your life, because it is 3 hours long. And when they do flashbacks and stuff like that, if you're not interested in at all in what they're talking about, then you'll probably feel kind of like super bored by the beginning, because there's this, in like the very beginning, Al Pacino is talking with Leonardo DiCaprio about his past movies his past TV shows, and it kind of seems like pointless when you're watching the scene, but it's enjoyable for somebody who likes old Hollywood or wants a good laugh, because the jokes are pretty funny in there. But yeah, they'll be talking and they'll mention a TV show and then they'll just cut back to the TV show and just show it, and they probably do that maybe like 10 times throughout the movie. They'll like show us specifically.
And it never feels choppy either. It never feels out of place. It feels really solid and pretty fun too.
Yeah, I think it flows well. Like, if they were talking and all of a sudden it cut to something that was boring, like, because, TV shows aren't constantly interesting. If it cut to like a scene that was boring or you needed more context to the scene to fully understand it, then I probably wouldn't have enjoyed it as much. But since they're taking out specific scenes that you don't need any context for, I feel like it's really fun to watch.
It was a very fun movie to watch. And I think really the only main complaint I have is that I think Quentin Tarantino was definitely very ambitious with the movie he did, and I think he almost fully pulled it off. But I think even with the amount of time, like we said, the movie was 3 hours long, I still think that he couldn't cram all that he wanted into the movie in that amount of time. I feel like he probably still wanted to do with like Margot Robbie. I think there was still some missing from Leonardo DiCaprio. Like some moments in there where he was acting, I feel like there could have been more elaboration on that. More elaboration with like the little girl, more elaboration with like a Brad Pitt story. I feel like there was definitely more room to tell more of a story. But the problem is the story was already 3 hours long, and if you expand any more on that, you basically have to make a really extremely long movie, which no one's probably going to want to watch.
Yeah.
Or you're just going to have to cut out other parts, and all of those other parts were either pretty necessary or extremely fun. So I just feel like he kind of trapped himself with all of the ambitions he had for this movie.
Yeah. And, you're talking about like he probably cut stuff out. I think that... Oh, my cat's trying to get out. I'm going to go let her out real quick and keep talking. So, even though, you said that it seems like he cut stuff out, I think there is a lot of stuff missing that he might include later. Because on Netflix, I don't know if you knew this, but they have The Hateful Eight, which is another Tarantino movie, and then they have Hateful Eight in kind of an extended edition where it's separate episodes that are like 40 or 50 minutes each, and so combined that's a much longer movie than what we originally got. And I think he might do that either like on the Blu-ray release for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or on Netflix. So I think we should come back to this movie if that does end up happening, and then we could talk about like if we think it's better with or without the extended scenes.
Yeah. And I think it probably will end up being better, because hopefully they do add some stuff in, because I could definitely tell that he wanted to do more. Mm-hmm. Like, especially, I think I could tell the most with probably either Leonardo DiCaprio or Margot Robbie.
Yeah.
It was strange. It seems like they did a lot with, like, tried to do a lot with Brad Pitt, especially, even though it seemed like Leonardo DiCaprio was supposed to be basically the star of the movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think they need to elaborate a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I'm excited to see like what happens with this movie next, because I don't feel like it's a completely finished, thing. Either Tarantino might come back to it, or he might give us more, like at least tell us what was originally supposed to happen, in like an interview or something. But I definitely want to know more about their stories. But yeah, so let's give it a rating, and I think that'll be it for today. So I'll give it I think before, right when we got out of the movie, I gave it like a 9.25, and I think I'm going to stick with that. So 9.25 out of 10 is my rating.
Yeah, coming out of the movie theater, I had a 9.2, and I think I'm going to stick with that too. It was a really solid movie.
Yeah. So overall, actually, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is probably tied for my favorite movie of the year. So I think at the end of the year, I'm going to need to decide between us and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And, what if we record an episode later, I'll let you guys know which one comes out on top. So, I don't know what to do for the outro. I still need to decide. But for now, let's just go. Thank you for tuning in. It's been... No, what am I doing? Okay, thank you for tuning in. I'm Jeffrey. And then you'll say, I'm Nate. And
I'm
then,
Nate.
And then we'll say... and you just listened to SoundWaves episode 6. Wait. And you just... I'm Jeffrey, I'm Nate. And you've listened to SoundWaves. Yeah, that's kind of bringing, the thing that Rob and I used to do back. Okay. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Jeffrey.
And I'm Nate.
And you've been listening to SoundWaves.